Buddhist science is a study on Buddhism based on facts and science.
What is the world and the nature? By Venerable Rungruan Papart Saro. Dr. Rungruan Lim Chu Patapa. In Buddhism, the world is a place where all beings are living together, and the nature or dharma is a collection of facts or truths happened in the world, so called the law of nature. These two words are often exchangeable in several contexts. For example, the Buddha's teachings are called dharma. His teachings are all about the truths of nature in accord to the law of cause and effect as a law of nature that governs all beings living in the world. The nature is a complex system, and every time when we observe the nature at one particular moment, we can detect a certain detailed condition of the system, called a state and a process of system. However, since all components in the system are dynamic, that is, interacting with others by various processes, and causing changes in conditions from one state to another state, as a result when making an observation on the system again, more or less the previous state has already turned into a new state. In scientific discovery, we study on the set of processes that make changes in states of the system, and by trying to quantify the relations among various components within the system, then we can derive a set of law that governs the observed system. The Buddha explains that everything and every phenomenon in nature can be characterized in terms of the three characteristics of nature as follows. 1. Everything in the world is impermanent, of which we can be simply explained that there is nothing permanent, but it will be constantly changing in its state by certain processing from one state into another state at all times. The notion of impermanence in Buddhism is sort of the dynamic of change in nature. In quantum physics, this kind of phenomenon is so evident that there is nothing stable in the universe. As for application to life, since we are born, all of us are aging every day. Every single cell will last for a while, and new cells are replacing the old ones. There is nothing permanent in life. 2. Everything in the world is constantly deteriorating or suffering. Scientifically, this is called entropy by the second law of thermodynamics. Once a system begins in nature, the entropy will keep on increasing until the system will be collapsed and the system will be renewed or restarting as sort of reincarnation again. Also, whoever is born, then he or she has to die eventually. Everything that arises will cease anyway, it is just a matter of time. The notion of deteriorating is usually applied on material things, and suffering is applied on beings, especially human being, because during the period of growing, most people may enjoy it, but later when it is aging and deteriorating, most people will feel suffering. Please be noted that the notion of deteriorating or suffering does not mean to promote the concept of pessimism on the nature in a negative view, but it is to warn us that life is short, and it is not simple as it is seen. We should not waste our time because we all will get old and die eventually. Therefore, we should search for the meaning of life, and to resolve the problem as soon as possible. In Buddhism, we should not be too optimistic in favor of whatever happening in the world, and in the meantime, we also should not be too pessimistic being against to whatever happening in the world. However, we should understand the reality of the world, realizing whatever the truth of the world is, and by doing so we will be able to release the attachment with the world naturally, and this is called the middle way of living principle. 3. Now if we understand the law of cause and effect clearly, then we can realize that there is no self. And by putting the whole context into a simple term, concluding that every phenomenon in the world is caused by the law of nature, and therefore the notion of no self is sort of being as it is by the law of nature. This principle of no self is considered as one of the greatest discoveries of the Buddhism, explaining that life and nature are simply natural processes in accord to a certain cause and effect in nature. It cannot be controlled or dictated by anyone's wish. And if anyone wants something to happen, then they must study on how to make the cause and effect, and then they have to get the work, karma, done rightly in order to get a result, no exception. The three characteristics of nature are stemmed from the fact that what happened in the nature is composed of process and state. The dynamic of nature is happening so fast that when making an inside observation on the nature, the state of nature is changing from one state to another state by a certain process, so the nature is impermanent. Also whatever being observed is arising and dying afterward, so the nature is deteriorating. And finally what happening in the world is caused by certain cause and effect by the law of nature, so as a consequent conclusively it is no self. And among all these three characteristics of nature, the first two characteristics of impermanent and deteriorating are quite articulates, however the notion of no self is a very abstract one.